The sun slid low over the frontier town, painting the street in a red-gold haze that mingled with wagon dust. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Lanterns flared to life in the saloon, their warm light spilling onto the creaking boardwalk, while the stable doors rocked in the restless wind. Near the worn steps of a boarding house, Ada Rowan sank to her knees. Her calico skirt was torn, the thin shawl at her shoulders, heavy with dust and sweat. Bracing her palms against the hard-packed earth, she raised her gaze to the man above her, a lone cowboy built from silence and hard miles. The brim of Cole Maddox's hat cut a deep shadow over his face, hiding his eyes, but not the weariness in the set of his shoulders. Trail-worn boots, a duster scarred by long rides, and a stance half-turned, as if danger might come from any direction, everything about him spoke of a drifter who trusted no one and carried his own storms. Ada's voice trembled, but held steady meaning. "I need one night's mercy," she said. "Not passion, just protection. They'll be here before dawn." Cole's jaw tightened. He'd heard pleas like that in other towns, other nights, words from someone cornered with nowhere left to run. Habit told him to keep walking. Trouble had a way of clinging once you let it inside. Last time he didn't, blood followed him for years. He told himself he wasn't anyone's savior. He owed nothing. Yet he didn't move. Ada read his hesitation and felt her stomach knot. Begging like this burned with shame, but fear burned hotter. For months, she'd been hounded by men who passed a forged debt like a cattle brand. That worthless paper had ended up with two ruthless brothers, Flint Rourke and Boone Nash, and now they were closing in. She'd run all day, lungs tight with dread of being dragged back and used to settle accounts that were never hers. Now she faced this stranger and sensed he might be the last wall between her and those men, even if only for one night. At last, Cole spoke, his voice low and flat. "I don't step into other folks' storms." His hand stayed on the rail, ready to leave. Then he added, "But the ground's cold. Stand up. There's room by my fire for one night." No more. Relief washed through Ada, though it offered little comfort. She no longer trusted easily, yet there was something in his blunt honesty that left no room for tricks. She pushed to her feet, legs trembling, and followed him down a shadowed alley. Each step felt like a wager, but she had nothing left to lose. They stopped at a narrow bunkhouse behind the livery, its rough boards patched where winter had split them, a thin wisp of smoke curling from the stovepipe. Inside smelled of leather wood smoke and honest work. A single bunk, a chair, and a small stove bare essentials, but for tonight it was salvation. Cole lit a lantern with practiced care, and in the flare, Ada glimpsed scars along his knuckles. Without a word, he poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. The cool metal steadied her, the first breath of safety she'd felt in weeks. Yet fear still pressed close, warning that dawn might bring questions, choices, even blood. Cole settled opposite her, back to the wall, eyes fixed on the door and narrow window, measuring whether she was a burden he could afford. Ada longed to say she wasn't helpless, but exhaustion stole her voice. She drew the blanket he offered around her shoulders and listened to the old boards creak, trying to believe one night of mercy could keep her alive. The small room smelled of iron and smoke. Cole poured coffee into 2 tin cups, sliding one to her. Ada cupped it in both hands, letting the bitter heat remind her she was still breathing, not yet caught. Her eyes roamed the sparse space, one spare blanket neatly folded, a saddle in the corner, a rifle leaning ready. No keepsakes, no photographs. Home to a man who never stayed long enough to leave a mark. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile, the kind two people understand when words cost more than they give. At last she spoke, needing him to know the truth. She told him of working at a ranch outside town, cooking, laundering, taking any chore thrown her way. She told how Cyrus McGraw, the foreman, had promised wages and even marriage, but when she pressed for pay, he claimed she owed for room meals and tools she'd never touched. The debt, scrawled on paper she'd never signed, had been passed on to Zeke Hollis and Jed Carver McGraw's cousins, who kept adding false charges until it landed in Flint and Boone's ruthless hands. Shame burned hotter than fear as she spoke. Cole listened without interrupting, his face hard but not unkind. When she finished, he asked only one question. "Anyone in this town know you're here?" "No one," Ada answered. "I came in on the back trail." Something in his shoulders eased, but his eyes stayed sharp. He understood the danger, and that by giving her shelter, he was already part of it. Cole Maddox listened without a single interruption, his lean face carved with hard lines, but never cruel. When Ada Rowan finally ran out of words, he asked just one question voice, even as the prairie at dawn. "Anyone here know you came into town?" Ada shook her head. "No one. I slipped in on the back trail, not the stage road." That answer eased something in him. He leaned back a fraction but kept his boots braced, every muscle ready. Ada thought about what small-town folks might already suspect. In a place like Dust Creek, everyone noticed who arrived, who left, and who walked with whom. If they spotted her beside this cowboy, tongues would wag that she'd traded herself for shelter. Pride stung, but survival outweighed pride tonight. Cole set down his cup and spoke with quiet authority. "If you stay under this roof, you follow my rules. No light past midnight, no sound anyone outside can catch. When dawn comes, you choose keep moving or face them here. I won't carry another soul's burden blind." His words were steady, but his eyes searched hers, testing whether she had the grit to stand by those terms. Ada nodded quickly. Oddly, the firm rules steadied her more than the chaos she'd been living in, yet she couldn't help wondering why he had agreed at all. Across the rough table, she studied him, trail dust on his clothes, a coat patched from old repairs, hands marked with close-quarters fights. Clearly no stranger to hardship. Though he claimed he didn't want anyone's troubles, she sensed he recognized hers in a way others never had. Softly, she asked, "Why stay in a place like this when most drifters ride on work steady?" He replied, without meeting her eyes. "Fences horses a few nights riding guard. Pays enough. No questions asked." She heard the unspoken part in his tone. He'd come here to bury shadows from his past. They finished the coffee in silence. When Cole told her to take the bunk, Ada wrapped herself in his spare blanket and lay down. He stayed in the chair, rifle within reach. Sleep wouldn't come easy. She pictured Flint Rourke and Boone Nash storming in the town watching, and Cole deciding her fight was too much to share. Yet as the stove clicked and cooled, she clung to the fragile sense of safety he offered. Cole remained awake long after her breathing steadied the weight of his choice pressing on him. He knew trouble would track her, and standing with her meant stepping back into the kind of fight he'd sworn off. But he also knew he wouldn't shove her into the dark. For this night, at least, her safety was his. Outside, only the soft tick of the stove and a stray dog's distant bark broke the silence. Cole sat in the chair, rifle-close boots, on eyes shifting between door and window. Years of trail drives and border towns had trained him to rest without sleeping. Ada lay with shallow breaths, mind spinning. What if the brothers showed up before sunrise? What would Dust Creek settlers think tomorrow, Would Cole send her away at dawn? Still, the blanket's warmth and his steady presence calmed her more than she expected. When gray light finally leaked through the narrow window, Cole rose, stretched the stiffness from his back, and eased open the door. The alley lay empty, save for a broken wagon and 2 dogs sniffing at scraps. No riders. No shouting. After a long look around, he stepped back inside. "You can get up," he said quietly. "No sign of them yet." Ada sat up, smoothing the creases in her skirt. Every muscle ached from days of flight, yet her hands were steady. She followed Cole to the pump behind the livery, splashing cold water over her face until the chill cut through her fatigue. He watched her composure, how she hid fear beneath a calm surface. "You hold steady," he murmured, almost to himself. "Falling apart never helped me." Ada answered. "People only use it against you." He gave a small nod, no argument needed. Together they walked into town as wagons rattled and shopkeepers raised shutters. Inside Amos Crow's mercantile, the warm smell of flour and leather wrapped around them. Ada asked for thread jerky lamp oil soap, a small tin of salve. Her voice, even her choices, practical. She laid hidden coins on the counter with quiet firmness, showing she was neither begging nor dependent. The clink of silver made Amos adjust his spectacles and study her longer than manners allowed, but he kept silent. Cole observed from the side. He'd seen women break under less, seen them hide or grow bitter. Ada bore her hardship, upright exhaustion in her eyes, but no surrender in her stance. She wasn't seeking rescue. She needed room to breathe and steer her own fate. That truth stirred something deep in him. He too knew what it meant to live under choices forced by others. As they stepped back into the morning light, Ada caught him watching her. For a heartbeat, she thought he might ask why she hadn't fled farther, why she hadn't crossed out of the territory altogether. Ada Rowan caught the unspoken question in Cole Maddox's eyes and answered before he could speak. "If I keep running, they'll chase me forever. Better to finish it here than live on the run." Cole gave a single thoughtful nod. Her resolve filled in the last blank he'd been weighing. She wasn't a drifter stumbling into trouble. She had chosen to face it, no matter the cost. By mid-morning, Dust Creek was shaking off sleep. Wagon wheels rattled. A blacksmith's hammer rang from Rex Dugan's shed, and laughter spilled from the saloon. Cole kept scanning the street, knowing quiet could snap in a heartbeat. He didn't say it aloud, but he was certain Flint Rourke and Boone Nash would show. Back at the bunkhouse, Ada simmered beans over the stove while Cole mended a halter with rawhide. The work was plain, yet a quiet pact settled between them. Keep busy, stay ready, meet whatever came with steady hands. When Cole tried to thank her for the meal, Ada shook her head. "Repayment starts with chores. If I stay under your roof, I pull my weight." It wasn't stubbornness, it was dignity. He gave a small, approving nod, understanding more than he said. This wasn't only about shielding her, it was about helping her reclaim the ground she'd lost, and maybe reclaiming a piece of himself as well. By noon, the sun blazed high, kicking up yellow dust with every wagon wheel and hoofbeat. They walked side by side toward the bunkhouse, each carrying small parcels from Amos Crow's store. Eyes followed them, curious, weighing, never neutral. In a settlement, this small strangers traveling together always fed the gossip mill, and Cole knew most folks had already spun their own version of Ada's story. Near the horse trough by Rex Dugan's forge, Marshal Owen Pike approached at an easy lope on a bay gelding. Broad-shouldered and weathered by years in the sun, he carried the quiet weight of a man who'd buried more friends than he cared to count. He tipped his hat to Cole, then studied Ada. The look wasn't cruel, but it carried the iron of the law heavy enough to drag a person under, if their past wasn't clean. "I heard talk of strangers riding in Pike," said evenly. "Figured I'd see for myself." Cole met the marshal's steady gaze. "She's under my roof for now. No trouble planned." Pike held his eyes a long moment, then gave a short nod. "Trouble doesn't always ask what you planned. If it comes, I expect to hear before bullets fly." The word bullets tightened Ada's throat. She wanted to spill everything, the crooked debts, the threats, but old scars warned her that law didn't always stand with women cornered by men. Sometimes it turned away. Sometimes it blamed the victim. She stayed silent, gripping the small parcel of thread and soap until her knuckles whitened. After Pike rode off, she asked quietly, "Can he be trusted?" Cole weighed the question. He follows the law when it's written plain, but the law doesn't reach every alley in Dust Creek. Some men know how to slip around it. The truth of that answer unsettled her, but honesty was better than false comfort. She nodded, though unease knotted her stomach. Back at the bunkhouse, Cole set aside his gear and returned to the rawhide strap, working in a silence broken only by the scrape of leather. Ada swept the plank floor, folded the blanket, and set beans to boil. Domestic calm should have soothed her, yet every clang from the forge, every creak of a wagon axle, every burst of saloon laughter kept her shoulders tight. At any moment, Flint and Boone could ride in and start asking dangerous questions. As they ate, Ada finally broke the silence. "When you said I had to choose at dawn, keep moving, or face them here. What if I'd said I was leaving?" Cole looked up briefly, then back to his plate. "I'd have saddled my horse and ridden you to the next crossing. After that, it would have been your trail." His bluntness startled her, but it made sense. He wasn't pretending to be a hero. He drew clear lines and expected her to understand. The stark clarity brought a strange comfort. Another question pressed on her. "Why help me at all? You could have walked past last night." Cole chewed, swallowed, and spoke low. "Because I've seen men hunted down for less, and I've seen women left in the dirt because nobody stepped in. I told myself I wouldn't stand by again." The raw truth in his voice struck her deep. Whatever ghosts he carried weren't distant. They were carved into him. Turning away from her would have added to that weight. As late afternoon light slanted through the single window, Ada kept her hands busy tidying the room so her thoughts wouldn't drown her while the fire in the stove cracked softly and the quiet thickened with unspoken resolve. Cole Maddox ran an oiled cloth along his rifle barrel with slow, deliberate strokes. Each pass was measured, patient. Neither he nor Ada Rowan spoke, but they both knew the quiet couldn't hold. By late afternoon, Dust Creek had slipped into its steady rhythm wagons, clattering past Amos Crow's mercantile cattle, bawling behind the stockyard saloon voices, carrying down the boardwalk. The sun sagged low, throwing long, restless shadows, and those shadows carried tension. Cole stepped out of the bunkhouse hat brim, pulled low, eyes sweeping the length of Main Street. Ada followed a few paces back, shawl tight around her shoulders. The change in the air reached her skin before she saw the reason. Two riders emerged at the far end of town, dust lifting in their wake. They rode too easy to be honest hands. Hats slouched coats open to show the walnut grips of their pistols. Rawhide cords hung at their throats with small metal discs, gambling tokens, not badges, but they wore them like badges of power. The Dust Creek settlers noticed fast. Silas Hart the barber stepped into his doorway with a towel over one shoulder. Amos Crow pretended to shift barrels, but never took his eyes off the strangers. Curiosity thickened the street, but no one called out. The riders reined near the public trough, hailing Luke Red, who was filling buckets. "You seen a woman traveling alone, shawl, scar on her wrist." Luke froze, wide-eyed. He flicked a glance toward the saloon and pointed that way. Just a boy doing what boys do, pointing to the loudest place in town. Cole's gut tightened. He hated seeing a kid dragged into their hunt. Stepping clear of the hay bales, he tipped his hat with a politeness that carried an edge. You boys lost saloons open if you're thirsty. The taller rider, a scar slicing his cheek, Flint Rourke narrowed his eyes. Looking for someone. Don't recall asking your help. Cole let silence stretch, then said flatly, Didn't say you asked, just pointing the way. The second rider. Boone Nash leaned forward in his saddle. You sure you haven't seen her? Cole's gaze didn't flicker. Only thing I've seen today is dust and the inside of a harness buckle. Haven't noticed anyone else. Hidden in the haze shadow, Ada felt her chest tighten. She willed his lie to hold. The memory of the scar they mentioned burned like fresh fire. She pressed the shawl closer, praying they wouldn't sense her just feet away. Flint and Boone exchanged a look. Doubt lingered, but so did caution. Cole's calm, unshaken stance told them he wasn't a man to spook. They measured the fight and found no easy gain. Flint spat into the dust. Maybe we'll stick around. Ask again later. Suit yourselves, Cole replied evenly. Town's small. You'll find what's here if you've got the patience. The two turned their horses toward the saloon, trying to look casual, while their eyes swept every doorway. Only when they vanished inside did Cole step back to Ada. They're here. We'll move fast. They'll drink watch and wait. His voice carried fact, not panic. Ada's throat tightened. What happens when they find out the truth? Then we deal with it, he said. Quiet first. Loud only if we have to. Inside the bunkhouse, Cole penned a short note for Luke Red to carry to Marshal Owen Pike. 2 men asking the wrong questions. I'll keep it quiet unless quiet fails. He folded it and handed it to the boy before Ada could protest. With a hard breath, she pulled the forged debt paper from her bodice and set it on the table, anger sharpening her tremor. This is all they've got, ink on paper. It started small. Now it's full of charges for meals, boots, tools I never touched. Cole studied it under the lamplight. The handwriting shifted, mid-page words, smeared names crossed and replaced. Not worth a dime in court, he said. No seal, no witness, no date of transfer. Ada's jaw set. Doesn't stop them from waving it like a weapon. He looked straight at her and saw the fierce mix of pride and desperation in her face. Get some rest on the bunk, he said quietly. I'll keep the chair. Boots stay on. She wanted to argue to prove she wasn't weak, but bone-deep fatigue closed her throat. She lay back, pulling the blanket to her chin, staring at the rafters while her heart pounded. She thought of Flint and Boone, of the townsfolk's watchful eyes, of Marshal Pike's measured look. For the first time, she wondered not just if she'd survive, but if Cole would stay when blood finally showed. Cole sat with his rifle across his knees, listening muted saloon music, the creak of wagon wheels heading home, a coyote's far-off cry. He didn't pretend otherwise. This was no longer only her fight. By giving her shelter, he'd already chosen a side. Night deepened over Dust Creek, the saloon spilling lantern light and fiddle music into the dusty street, while danger edged closer with every echo. Cole Maddox kept polishing the rifle barrel in steady, unhurried strokes, each movement quiet but full of purpose. Ada Rowan lay on the bunk, eyes open, though she slowed her breathing so he might think she slept. Both of them knew the silence would not last. Outside, Flint Rourke and Boone Nash lingered in the saloon, drinking slow and tracking every stranger through its windows. Whenever laughter spiked or spurs clinked across the boardwalk, Ada's body went rigid. Her mind circled back to the forged debt note on the table, how a few crooked lines of ink had become a chain around her life. Cole finally broke the hush. That paper they wave can't stand in any court, but it's enough to scare folks. Ada sat up, dark hair slipping loose from her braid. "Then why haven't they dragged me out already? Because men like that weigh the odds," he said evenly. "They'll shove and threaten, but they don't want to draw iron in the street with Marshal Owen Pike nearby. They'll wait for a quiet corner." The thought brought no comfort. And when they do, Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice calm and sure. "Then I'll be there before they touch you. But Pike needs to see that note himself, not just hear my say-so. Otherwise, it's my word against theirs." Ada lowered her eyes to the worn floorboards, depending on another's word, chafed. "Sheriffs don't always stand with a woman." "I know," Cole said simply. He had seen law bent, and women left unguarded. He studied the messy handwriting again, then folded the paper. "Tomorrow, we lay this in front of Pike. Daylight and witnesses will make them prove it or fail." She hesitated. More eyes meant more whispers, but running had bought her nothing but more fear. All right, tomorrow. Hours dragged. Near midnight, the saloon doors banged shut. Heavy boots scuffed through wet dust as the brothers laughed and staggered toward the hotel opposite Amos Crow's Mercantile. Cole listened until their spurs faded, then eased back in his chair but kept his eyes open. Sleep wasn't part of his plan. Morning broke gray and damp rain, soaking the street into mud. Ada stirred beans on the stove while Cole rolled his blanket and checked the rifle with practiced care. Nothing he did was careless. Every move had reason. The question she'd carried since the night she begged for help finally rose. "Why didn't you turn me away that first night? You could have said no." Cole rested the rifle and met her gaze without the usual wall. "Because once a woman asked me for help, and I told myself it wasn't my fight. She never lived to ask again. I won't make that mistake twice." The raw honesty stilled her. She longed to ask who that woman had been, but the tight line of his jaw warned her to leave that sorrow buried. After breakfast, he handed Ada his spare slicker, and together they walked to the sheriff's office through a curtain of cold rain. Townsfolk stepped aside, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Inside, Marshal Owen Pike sat behind a scarred desk ledger, open spectacles low on his nose. Cole laid the folded note before him. Pike flattened it, brows tightening at the crossed-out names and crooked script. "Sloppy work," he muttered. "No seal, no witness, no clerk stand. Not worth the ink." He pulled out a blank affidavit. "If they push this, you'll both swear the facts here. But men like that don't quit easy." Ada's hands clenched. If it's void, why not stop them now? Pike exhaled slowly. "Because they don't live by the law. I can tear this paper in half, but it won't stop their kind from trying. What it does is give me ground to stand on when they make their move. And they will." Cole nodded once, understanding. Relief and dread warred inside Ada. The law finally tilted in her favor, but she knew words on paper wouldn't stop fists or bullets. When they stepped back into the muddy street, Flint and Boone waited across from the saloon, eyes locked on her with a promise that tomorrow would not pass quiet. Cole's voice stayed flat. "It starts now. No turning back." Ada tightened the slicker around her shoulders, rain dripping from her bonnet. "Good," she said low but firm. "I'm done running." Rain drummed through the night, beating a heavy rhythm on the bunkhouse roof and turning Main Street into rutted mud. By dawn, smoke from stovepipes hung low and damp. Cole had slept only in snatches. He sat at the table rifle, close, listening to every sound, the slosh of boots through mud, the rattle of wagon chains shutters groaning in the wind. Ada moved quietly, hair damp from washing, face drawn, but steadier than yesterday. She had chosen her ground. While she stitched the torn cuff of his shirt with careful hands, Cole fried eggs in bacon grease and slid the plate between them. They ate in silence until Ada spoke. "I told you about the debt and Cyrus McGraw, but not why I stayed so long. Folks will wonder, and so will you." Her eyes stayed on her plate. "He promised marriage. Promised I'd have a home of my own." Ada Rowan kept her eyes on the floorboards as she spoke. I wanted to believe him. I was tired of drifting, so I ignored the signs until it was too late. By the time I understood, I owed him more than he ever owed me. Cole Maddox listened in silence. He knew exactly how Dust Creek settlers might twist those words, how they'd claim she'd brought the trouble on herself, that she should have known better. He also knew what it was to gamble on trust when weariness left no other road. He lowered his brow and said quietly, "You believed because you needed something to hold on to. That's not your fault, it's his." Relief and shame collided in her chest. No one had ever spoken it so plain. For the first time in months, she felt less a fool, more a woman wronged. Outside the town woke under a gray, wet sky. Flint Rourke and Boone Nash sat in the saloon again, drinking less, and watching more, their eyes sharp on every door she might use. When Ada finally stepped out beside Cole, shawl drawn tight, she felt the boardwalk's stairs cut like spurs. Whispers followed, foreman's girl, debt, running from something. Each murmur pressed heavier than rain. Cole noticed the set of her jaw, the way she refused to look aside. He leaned closer, voice just above the drizzle. "Let them talk. What matters is what we can prove." By mid-morning, Marshal Owen Pike arrived, mud streaking his boots, a freight ledger under his arm. He stopped before Amos Crow's mercantile, where a half-circle of neighbors gathered. Flipping open the ledger, Pike read aloud, "No wages ever entered for Ada. Rowan, only supply debts. Cyrus McGraw had charged to himself whiskey tools, spare tack later shuffled into the accounts of Zeke Hollis and Jed Carver. None of it tied to her name. This note they carry is worthless," Pike declared. "Every number belongs to the foreman and his kin, not her." Flint Rourke smirked, voice carrying across the boardwalk. "Ledger or no ledger she owes, and will collect." His hand brushed the butt of his pistol, a promise of violence. The crowd stiffened. Amos muttered, "Law's the law," but no one moved. Ada's pulse hammered. Proof might mean nothing if fear ruled the street. Cole stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Ada and the brothers. His voice was calm, but edged like a drawn blade. The sheriffs ruled it void. "Press it now and you're not chasing a debt, you're committing robbery." Pike rested a hand on his revolver. "That's right. Push this and you answer to county law." Flint and Boone swept their gaze over the bystanders. No one rushed to help Ada, but no one sided with them either. More telling was Cole's unyielding stance and Pike's steady hand near his gun. After a taut silence, Flint sneered. "This ain't done." They turned back toward the saloon, everyone knowing it was only a pause, not a retreat. That evening the rain thinned, leaving the air heavy and damp. Inside the bunkhouse, Ada sat by the stove, hands tight in her lap. "Even with proof they won't quit," she said. "What's the law worth if men like that ignore it?" Cole rested his rifle across his knees. "The law gives us ground to stand on. The rest we handle ourselves. You said you were tired of running. Tomorrow we face them open, not hiding, not kneeling." Fear still knotted Ada's chest, yet beneath it, a steadiness grew. She trusted his words and felt her own strength rising to meet them. The next dawn broke clear and sharp. Sunlight gleamed on streets still slick with yesterday's rain. Ada woke early, sitting on the bunk's edge, with clasped hands, mind full of Flint and Boone. She knew Marshal Pike's judgment hadn't ended anything, only delayed it. The town's whispers might weigh as heavily as the truth in the ledger. Cole moved quietly, pulling on his duster and checking his revolver with practiced calm. He poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one toward her. "Today they'll push harder," he said. "If we leave it to rumor, they win. We settle this in the open." Ada stared into the dark coffee. What if the town doesn't care? What if they see me only as the foreman's woman? "Then they'll see me standing beside you," Cole answered without hesitation, and Pike holding the ledger. "That's enough." Later that morning, Marshal Pike called the townsfolk together outside Amos Crow's store. He held the freight ledger in one hand, the forged note in the other, his badge catching the sun. Curiosity drew people fast. Rex Dugan with soot on his sleeves, May Boone and Della Frost with aprons still tied, prairie kids peeking from posts. On the frontier, when a judge rode days away, this was how a town faced a fight. The morning sun climbed over Dust Creek, sharp on the wet roofs, as Marshal Owen Pike gathered a loose ring of Dust Creek settlers outside Amos Crow's store. He wanted witnesses on every side so no one could claim they hadn't seen justice done. From the saloon came Flint Rourke and Boone Nash, striding slow and deliberate coats hanging open to show the heavy irons on their hips. Flint's scar caught the light as he raised his voice. "She owes us. That's plain." Pike held up the stained debt note. "This paper's worthless, no seal, no witness, no ledger to match. Every figure belongs to Cyrus McGraw and his kin, not Ada Rowan. This isn't debt, it's fraud." With one hard pull, he ripped the note in half and let the pieces fall into the mud. A murmur rolled through the crowd, relief tangled with unease. Boone's jaw tightened, but it was Flint who stepped forward, sneering. "Ledger don't change what's owed," she ran from her word. "That makes her ours to collect." His hand hovered near his pistol, meaning clear. Ada felt her throat lock, then forced the words out stronger than she thought possible. "I worked every day, cooked, washed, wore my hands raw. I was promised wages, not chains. Every coin was stolen, every number on that paper forged. The sheriff has the proof. You have nothing but lies." Heads in the crowd began to nod. Amos Crow stepped forward. "She's telling it straight. I saw one of those cousins forge a brand last spring. I wouldn't trust a breath they take." Finn Porter, the freight clerk, added his voice, waving a ledger page. "I entered the accounts myself. Those supplies were charged to McGraw's kin, not her." Marshal Pike faced the brothers. "You've heard the record and the witnesses. Try this again and you answer to county law. That means irons and a ride south." Flint's jaw worked as he looked from Pike to Cole Maddox, who stood unshaken, one hand near his sidearm. The brothers gauged the moment and saw no allies, only a sheriff ready to draw, and a town leaning against them. After a long, brittle silence, Flint spat in the mud. "This ain't the last of it." They swung into their saddles and rode off slow, trying to look like men leaving on their own terms. Ada's knees weakened, but she stood tall, refusing to show the relief that surged through her. She knew they could come back. But for this day, the law had not turned away. She glanced at Cole, steady as bedrock, and felt something shift deep inside. He wasn't claiming to be a savior, yet he stood when others would have walked. Back at the bunkhouse, Marshal Pike left them with a final warning. They might ride out, but men like that don't forget. Keep watch. For now the law's at your side. He tipped his hat and strode off, leaving them in the fading gold of late afternoon. Inside, Ada tried to fold the blanket, her hands trembling. "It's not over," she whispered. Cole poured coffee, set a cup in front of her, and sat down. "No," he said evenly, "but it's a start." Word soon reached them from Finn Porter that Flint and Boone hadn't gone far. They'd pitched camp near the river crossing a mile out, their fire burning late. The rumor spread through town like smoke, stirring unease in every corner. When Ada went to pump water, she heard Boone murmur, "Trouble never leaves quiet," and another voice behind her add, "She should have left with the sheriff after that note got torn." Each comment cut deep, but she walked on back straight-face calm. Inside the bunkhouse, the air felt thick. Cole sat at the table, oiling his revolver piece by piece. Ada watched tension pressing on her ribs. "They won't stop," she said finally. "If they wait out there, they're planning something. They're waiting to see if fear does their work," Cole answered. "If you run, they win. If the town turns on you, they win. But if we stand, they'll have to show their hand." Ada clenched her hands. "And if they draw first, then we finish it before they touch you," he said, voice flat but steady. That night, neither slept much. Ada lay awake, listening to the soft scrape of his chair and the groan of boards when the wind pressed against the walls. Shame from months past pressed in how she'd believed Cyrus McGraw's promises, how she'd once prayed for the stability that never came. She wondered if Cole judged her for trusting a liar. Finally, she spoke into the dark. "Do you think I was weak to believe him?" "No," Cole said after a quiet pause. "You were worn out and wanted something steady. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." The plain truth loosened the tightness in her chest. For the first time, she felt no need to defend herself, only understood. At dawn, Marshal Pike returned with a small band of townsfolk, the freight ledger under his arm again. "I spoke with the circuit judge," he told them. "He confirmed what we already know: this so-called debt has no standing. If they press it again, I have grounds to put them in irons." Marshal Owen Pike left them with a final warning. "Men like that don't surrender to paper. If they ride back, it'll be with force. And when it happens, every soul in Dust Creek will have to choose whether to stand with you or look the other way. Best be ready." Ada Rowan understood then that Pike had done more than uphold the law. He had forced the whole town to witness the truth, so no one could later claim ignorance. Still, unease stayed with her. "And if the town doesn't stand?" she asked. Pike's reply was firm. "Then it'll be me, him, and you. Sometimes that has to be enough." As the day stretched on, the town shifted in quiet, telling ways. Amos Crow, who once only watched from behind his counter, brought a heavy sack of flour to the bunkhouse and set it on the table without a word. Rex Dugan stopped by to offer free repairs on Cole's stirrup leather. Small gestures, but they carried weight. One by one, people were choosing a side. Near dusk, a young voice cut the evening calm. Luke Red sprinted from the edge of town, calling out, "They're back! The brothers coming in slow like they own the place." Cole Maddox rose at once, sliding his revolver into its holster. His face stayed unreadable. Ada's stomach went cold, but she forced herself upright, drew her shawl tight, and steadied her breath. She remembered the words she'd spoken before the whole street, and the nods she'd seen among the Dust Creek settlers. She would not hide. Together, they stepped out. The street already thrummed with boots and low voices. Flint Rourke and Boone Nash rode side by side, hands close to their pistols, eyes hard. The air felt heavy waiting. Cole's voice was calm, carrying across the muddy street. "This ends tonight. You laid your claim and lost. There's nothing left to take." Flint sneered. "We decide when it ends." Marshal Pike moved forward, badge flashing in the low light. "No, the law does. If you want to draw, do it in front of all of us and answer for it." The crowd held its breath. Ada stood between Cole and Pike, her heart hammering, but her spine straight. She had been cornered too many times to bow again. The scar on Flint's face caught the fading sun as his hand hovered over his gun. "Ledger or no ledger, She's ours to settle with." Pike's voice cut sharp. "You try that here and you answer with irons or a coffin. The county won't ask twice." His hand rested easy on his revolver ready. The brothers' eyes moved from the sheriff to Cole. Cole hadn't shifted an inch. One hand stayed loose near his holster, his gaze fixed and unblinking. He wasn't bluffing. He was prepared. A cold clarity steadied Ada. If they forced a fight, Cole would meet it without hesitation. For a long, taut moment, the street was nothing but breath and heartbeat. Then Flint cursed under his breath and jerked his reins. Not worth it. Not here. His horse slogged through the mud with a loud sucking sound. Boone followed, tossing Ada a last look meant to frighten, but she didn't flinch. The riders turned and headed out at a measured pace, trying to keep the pride they no longer owned. The crowd exhaled as one. Some murmured relief, others shook their heads, but no one doubted what they had seen, the brothers beaten not with bullets, but with proof witnesses and a will that would not bend. Marshal Pike faced Ada. "It's done. They won't try again here. Word will travel shamed before the law and the town. That carries farther than lead." Ada's knees wanted to buckle, yet she stood tall. For the first time in months, the weight she carried began to lift. The paper, the whispers, the threats had all lost their hold. She turned to Cole, who still watched the far end of the street where Flint and Boone had disappeared. "Why didn't you draw?" she asked softly after Pike moved off. Cole finally looked at her. "Because they didn't deserve it. Killings for when there's no other way. Today there was another." That night the bunkhouse felt different no longer, just borrowed walls, but a place with a future. Ada cooked beans and cornbread, while Cole mended tack, their quiet chores, stitched with a peace neither had known in a long while. When Marshal Pike returned later to report that the brothers had crossed the county line, Ada let herself believe the fight was truly over. In the weeks that followed, life found a steady rhythm. Ada took honest work in the cookhouse, earning wages of her own. And every evening, as the sun dipped over the wide, empty land she and Cole shared, a home that no longer felt temporary proof that some stands once taken could hold for good. While Cole Maddox spent his days mending fences and swapping an old saddle for fresh lumber, he quietly built a second chair to sit beside the first. Each small task felt like staking a claim on a life that finally belonged to them both. One clear afternoon, as the sun sank low behind the sawmill, Dust Creek settlers gathered in quiet respect outside the bunkhouse yard. There was no wedding ring, no circuit preacher, no polished speeches, just Marshal Owen Pike, Amos Crow, Silas Hart, and May Boone standing witness. Cole and Ada Rowan faced each other and spoke plain words of promise, bread and water, shared work and evening rest. Nothing fancy, nothing less. They joined hands, simple, steady vows meant to last. That night they sat by the stove with 2 tin cups on the table, and the door left unlatched, the night air calm and sweet. For the first time, there were no shadows pressing in. No forged debt hanging over her, no ghosts tugging him back to the trail. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.